This video actually, will demonstrate the use of the locals window in VBA. One of the problems, I think, for many beginning programmers is that when we start talking about variables and variables representing memory storage, that's a little bit of an abstract concept. You have to imagine that in your mind. It's not something you can touch and feel very readily. And so this demonstration of using the locals window will maybe help a student kind of get a sense of what's going on. And so to use the locals window, I'm going to do several things in this video. For starters, we need to view the locals window. So under the view menu in VBA, you'll notice there is an option here for the locals window, so I'll choose that option. And what it does is it opens up this window pane, and you can resize this window pane. You can drag it up and down and so on. And I'll resize so that we can see both the program and the locals window at the bottom. Another thing that is very useful when you want to view the variables, and when I say useful, it's almost mandatory that you do this, is that what we're going to do is we're going to set a breakpoint in our program so that we basically stop the program at a particular point, and we can actually then sort of look inside our program when we do that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just click right up here at the very beginning of my subroutine, my sub demo there. I'm just going to click, and you notice if I click in that left hand column that it puts a little dot and it highlights that line of code in red, dark red, and that is setting a breakpoint at that point in my program. Now once I've set a breakpoint in my program, I can start to run my program, and I want you to notice under the run menu, all you have is the run, and then you have a break and reset. But if you look under the debug menu, you have a step into option, which is F8 on your keyboard. And so essentially what that will do is it will just step through your program statement by statement. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose that step into option. And you'll notice as soon as I stepped into that subroutine, it highlighted the current line that I'm about ready to execute. So basically it's saying, oh, we're about ready to execute this subroutine. And you'll notice down at the bottom in my watch window, you'll notice that it's a little bit difficult to see, so you might want to zoom this to full screen. I don't know if I can change the font on that. I don't think I can, but maybe I could if I was thoughtful. But you'll notice that it immediately displays my three variables. So here's my total cost of widgets, my cost of widgets, and my quantity of widgets. Those are my three variables. It tells me what their current values are at the beginning of this subroutine, and you'll notice that Visual Basic actually sets the default values on numeric variables to 0. And you'll notice over here it also has the data type of those three variables, and those are of course longs, and you can see up in the program that they've all been declared as longs. So essentially what we're seeing down here then are the variables that are local, if you will, to this subroutine. The word local means that essentially these three variables can only be used within this subroutine. So if I had multiple subroutines in my program, those variables can only be used by the code that's running in that demo subroutine. Another subroutine could not use those variables, could not access those variables. They're local. They call this scope. In other words, what is the scope of those variables? Where can those variables be seen? And in this case, it's local scope. The opposite of local scope is global scope, and that means a variable declared at the global scope can be accessed by any subroutine. By the way, global variables are considered to be a bad thing, so keep that in mind. Global variables are a bad thing. So my program is running right now. It's stopped on this line, and it's about ready to execute this line, and I can hit the F8 key, or I can choose the debug option menu here and say step into. You notice there are other options here, but I'm only going to talk about step into right now. So I just say step into, and it jumps down, and it's about ready to execute that message box statement. Now, the reason it jumped over those three dim statements is those are really not executable statements. Those are more declarations that my program is saying, I would like to reserve these three memory locations and give them these names. So the next time I hit F8 on my keyboard, it will actually execute that message box statement. You'll notice a little yellow arrow in the column on the left. So I'll hit F8, and it executed the message box statement, and there's the little message box statement. And then I'll just click OK on that message box. And you'll notice it's ready to execute the next line of code, which is an input box statement. I'll hit the F8, and it's asking me how many widgets I want. And let's say I want 5 widgets, so I'll click OK. And I'm going to stop here because you'll notice now that I've entered 5 widgets in this input box, that the assignment took place after that input box statement was executed. So the user clicked the OK button, the input box now has its value, and the assignment takes place and assigns the value to this memory location called quantity of widgets. And if I look down here in my watch, there's quantity of widgets, and it's got the value 5. Now another thing that you might want to notice, that when you are actually running in break mode like this, if you hover your mouse over the variable, so I just hover my mouse over quantity of widgets, it will also tell you what the value of that variable is at that point in time. So if I was to, let's say I come down and I hover my mouse over this total cost of widgets variable, it's 0. Well, of course it's 0 because it hasn't been assigned a value yet. And indeed, the 0 is reflected down here in my watch window. So the watch window gives you the nice list of all your variables, but you can also just take your mouse and move them over the tops of your variables and see what their values are. So let's go ahead and hit F8 again, and it'll execute the current yellow line there. How much does each widget cost? Let's say $10. And of course, the 10 is now down here in the cost of widgets. And also I could hover over that cost of widgets and it'll tell me that they're 10. And let's hit F8 again. And now it did what? I didn't get a dialog box. Well, that statement basically was a multiplication. So it took the cost of widgets and it took the quantity of widgets and it multiplied them together and it got me my total cost. And if I hover over total cost, of course, it's going to say 50. And you'll notice, of course, as soon as that statement was executed, that the 50 changed down here in the local watch window. And pretty much finishing the program by hitting F8, and it puts that dialog box on the screen, and you click OK, and the program now is ready to execute the end sub. The program's still running. If I hit F8 one more time, the program is now completed. It's no longer running. The local watch window is cleared. So again, to use the local watch window, you essentially have to use your view menu and display it on the screen with the locals watch window option here. You would put a breakpoint in your program. You can put it right at the top, or if you really wanted to, you could break way down here on this message box. Then the whole program will just run straight through until it gets to the message box down at the bottom. But I like to break, and then you can use the F8 key to step through your program statements and watch each statement execute in turn and watch the values of your variables change as your program executes. This is a fantastic tool for you to understand how the sequence of statements in your program actually execute and how the variables all interact with each other. It allows you essentially to see inside the computer's memory as the program is running. So it's a fantastic tool, and I encourage you to think about using it, especially when you have a program that's not doing what you think it ought to be doing. Thank you very much.